I should have known something was wrong when the church bell rang at midnight. That bell hadn't worked in 6 years. Everyone in Forks knew it. The rope rotted through back in 2019, and nobody ever bothered fixing it because, honestly, who cared? We all had phones. We had that old emergency radio system that wheezed to life whenever a storm was coming. The bell was just there, rusting away in the tower like everything else in this town that people had given up on. But that Tuesday night in October, it rang 3 times, clear and loud. I was driving home after spending 4 hours fixing Mrs. Patterson's water heater, which had decided to leak all over her basement floor. My hands still smelled like rust and pipe grease. The sound of that bell cut right through the fog, echoing off the mountains surrounding us. I actually pulled over because I thought maybe I was hearing things. The fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead, and when I looked up at the church steeple through my windshield, all I could make out was a dark shape against the darker sky. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Nina had texted me. "Did you hear that?" I picked up my phone and typed back with one hand. "The bell?" "Yeah. Super weird." Those 3 dots appeared like she was typing something, then vanished, then came back, then vanished again. Finally, her message came through. "I don't like it." Nina Clark wasn't someone who spooked easily. She'd been working as a paramedic for 8 years and had seen some genuinely terrible stuff. Car wrecks on the mountain road where she had to pull people out of twisted metal. Hunting accidents where guys came in missing fingers or worse. She'd even dealt with my Uncle Harvey when he wandered into the woods at 3 a.m. last winter, convinced he had a shift at the mines that closed down 15 years ago. If Nina said something felt off, I usually listened. But like I said, I'm kind of an idiot sometimes. "Old stuff settling," I typed back. "Wind doesn't ring a bell 3 times, Eli." I didn't really have an answer for that, so I just sent her a thumbs up and kept driving. The road was completely empty, which wasn't unusual. After 9 at night, Forks basically rolled up its sidewalks. We had about 540 people living here on a good day, and most of them were home by the time the sun went down. Our nightlife consisted of Murphy's Bar, which closed at 10, and a gas station that stayed open until 11 if you were lucky. That was it. My house sat at the very edge of town, a small cabin my grandfather built back in the 70s before he died, and left it to Uncle Harvey. Harvey had been living there alone until his dementia got bad enough that I moved in to keep an eye on him. Some days were better than others. Some days he knew exactly who I was and could tell you stories about working in the mines. Other days he'd look right at me and ask where his brother was, and I'd have to remind him that my dad had been dead for 3 years. I pulled into the gravel driveway and turned off the engine. The porch light was on, which was a good sign. It meant Harvey had remembered to flip the switch before it got dark. On his bad days, I'd come home and find him sitting in complete darkness, just staring at nothing. I walked up the creaky porch steps and pushed open the front door. The smell of chicken soup hit me right away, the stuff I'd made that morning before leaving for work. That meant he'd actually eaten lunch, which made me feel a little less guilty about being gone all day. "Uncle Harvey?" I called out, dropping my keys on the little table by the door. "In here, boy." His voice came from the living room. He was sitting in his recliner with a blanket tucked over his lap, staring at the TV. Some old western was playing with the sound muted. John Wayne or Clint Eastwood, I couldn't tell which. "You hear that bell earlier?" I asked, walking over to stand beside his chair. Harvey didn't look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the TV screen. "The hollow talks when it wants to," he said in this quiet, distant voice. "Always has." Here we go, I thought. The hollow. That was his new thing lately. He'd been talking about it for weeks now. This place called the Hollow that supposedly existed somewhere in the old mines. His doctors told me it was normal for dementia patients to fixate on certain ideas, especially things connected to their past. Harvey had spent 40 years working underground before the mines shut down. Made sense that his brain would loop back to that. "Right," I said, heading toward the kitchen. "You want some tea before bed?" It rang 3 times, Harvey continued, and something in his tone made me slow down. 3 times means it's waking up. 3 times means it's hungry again. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove, trying to ignore the little cold feeling creeping up the back of my neck. Harvey said a lot of things that didn't make sense anymore. This was just another one of those things. I needed to stop letting it get to me. The kettle had just started to whistle when every single light in the house flickered. Once, twice, then they steadied. And then my phone started screaming, not ringing, not buzzing, screaming. This sharp, piercing emergency alert tone that I'd only heard during tornado warnings, and we didn't even get tornadoes here. I nearly dropped the kettle as I fumbled for my phone, hot water splashing onto the counter and soaking into my sleeve. The screen was so bright it hurt to look at. A message filled the entire display, the text stark and clear. Civil emergency in effect. Do not commit acts of violence. Remain calm. Do not harm others. Failure to comply will have consequences. I just stood there, staring at it, my brain struggling to make sense of what I was reading. Civil emergency? Here? In Forks? We didn't have civil emergencies. The biggest crime we'd had in the past year was when Tommy Marsh got drunk at Murphy's and accidentally backed his truck into the post office wall. Sheriff Leland made him pay for the repairs, and that was that. From the living room, I heard Harvey's TV suddenly blare the same alert tone. Then the radio on the kitchen counter joined in. Then I heard it outside, coming from every direction, every house on the street, every phone, every TV, every radio. All of them screaming that same piercing tone at once. The sound was so loud it made my ears ring. It felt like the walls were vibrating. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The noise was everywhere, layering over itself, creating this horrible, discordant wall of sound that made my head throb. And then it just stopped. Complete silence. Not even the normal sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator or the creak of old wood settling. Nothing. I looked down at my phone. The message was still there, glowing on the screen, but now the signal bars at the top showed nothing. No service. The little Wi-Fi icon had vanished too. I tried calling Nina, but the call failed immediately. Tried to open my browser and the page wouldn't load. It was like someone had just cut every connection to the outside world all at once. "Uncle Harvey?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. He didn't answer. I walked back to the living room, my heart beating a little too fast. Harvey was still in his chair, but now he was staring straight at me. His eyes were different, clear, focused. More alert than I'd seen them in months, and somehow that was worse than when they were distant and confused. "It started," he whispered. "What started?" I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Harvey's eyes stayed locked on mine. That clarity in them was unsettling, like someone had reached into his confused mind and switched on a light that had been dark for years. "The hollow's awake now," he said. "It's going to feed." "Harvey, you're not making any sense. What hollow? What are you talking about?" He turned back to the TV, which was now just showing static, that fuzzy gray-white snow that filled the screen. "We spilled too much blood in those mines, boy," he said quietly. "Accidents, fights, men going crazy down in the dark. We fed it without even knowing what we were doing. And when the company finally sealed everything up, we all thought that was the end of it." He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just this dry, bitter sound. "But see, you can't starve something like that. You can only make it wait, make it patient." "Harvey, please, you're scaring me." 3 times, he said, his voice suddenly sharp and clear. "The bell rang 3 times. That's the warning. That's how you know it's hungry again." He looked at me and I saw fear in his eyes, real and raw. "Don't hurt anyone, Eli. I mean it. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear or dream about, don't hurt anyone. That's what it wants. That's how it feeds. That's how it gets stronger. Before I could say anything, my phone buzzed in my hand. Somehow, impossibly, a text had gotten through. From Nina. Something's wrong. 3 people just came into the clinic. They're saying they all had the same nightmare. I need you here. Now. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my keys off the side table. I have to go, I told Harvey. Will you be okay here by yourself? He'd already turned back to the TV, back to that static, and he was mumbling again. The clarity was gone from his eyes like it had never been there at all. The hollow talks back now, he muttered, and when it does, people listen. They always listen. I ran out the front door into the night. The fog had gotten even thicker somehow, rolling down from the mountains in heavy waves. I could barely see my truck in the driveway. The air felt wrong, too cold and too still at the same time, and when I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key, I half expected the engine not to start. But it did, rumbling to life like normal, and I backed out onto the empty street. The drive to the clinic only took about 5 minutes, but it felt longer. The fog pressed against my windshield like something alive, and my headlights barely cut through it. I passed maybe 3 houses with lights on. Everyone else's windows were dark. Either they'd all gone to bed early, or they were sitting in the dark trying to figure out what that emergency alert meant. The clinic sat on Main Street, right next to the post office. It was a small building, just 4 rooms and a waiting area, but it was all we had. Nina worked there 3 days a week, and Doc Morrison covered the other days when he wasn't dealing with his own health problems. I pulled into the parking lot and saw Nina's car and 2 others I didn't recognize. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open and the little bell above it jingled. That normal, everyday sound somehow making everything feel even more wrong. "Nina?" I called out. "Back here," her voice came from one of the examination rooms. I walked down the short hallway, my shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, twice, then steadied. Through the open doorway, I could see Nina standing beside an examination table. A woman sat on the table, wrapped in a blanket, shivering even though the room wasn't cold. Nina looked up when I came in. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from stress rather than lack of sleep. "Eli, thanks for coming. What's going on?" The woman on the table looked at me. I recognized her now. Margaret Sawyer lived over on Birch Street with her husband. She was maybe 50, usually put together and calm. Right now she looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her eyes were red from crying and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Tell him," Nina said gently. "Tell him what you told me." Margaret's voice came out hoarse and broken. "I had a dream," she said, "about my husband, about killing him." I felt my stomach drop. "What?" "I was asleep," she continued, the words tumbling out faster now. At least I think I was asleep. But it felt so real. I was standing in our bedroom and David was lying in bed and I had a knife in my hand. His hunting knife, the one he keeps in the garage. And I was standing there watching him sleep and this voice in my head kept saying, "Do it, do it. He's not real, it's just a dream, it doesn't matter." Tears started running down her face. I wanted to do it. I wanted to so badly. But then I woke up and I was actually standing in our bedroom and I was holding that knife and David was right there sleeping and I almost... She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Nina put a hand on Margaret's shoulder, then looked at me. "She's the 3rd one tonight." Tom Bradley came in an hour ago saying almost the exact same thing. Then Sarah Chen. They all had dreams about hurting someone. They all woke up to find themselves actually doing it, or about to do it. "That's impossible," I said. But even as the words came out, I thought about Harvey's warning. Don't hurt anyone. That's what it wants. Tom was choking his son. Nina continued quietly. He woke up with his hands around the kid's throat, stopped himself just in time. Sarah was standing over her mother with a hammer. She lowered her voice even more. Eli, they all said the same thing, that it felt like they were dreaming, but they weren't. That something was telling them it was okay, that none of it was real. I thought about the emergency alert. Do not commit acts of violence. What if it's connected? I said. What if whatever sent that alert knew this was going to happen? That's what I'm afraid of, Nina said. She glanced at Margaret, who was still crying quietly, then gestured for me to follow her out into the hallway. Once we were far enough away that Margaret couldn't hear, she continued. I tried calling Sheriff Leland, but my phone's not working. Tried the landline too. Nothing's getting through. We're completely cut off. Mine's not working either. Nobody's is, I think. This is bad, Eli. Really bad. If people start hurting each other, if whatever's causing these dreams gets worse. A scream cut through the night outside. High and sharp and terrified. Then another one. Then shouting. Nina and I ran to the front of the clinic and looked out the window. Across the street, I could see lights coming on in houses. People were stumbling out onto their porches, shouting to each other. Someone was crying. Someone else was yelling for help. Stay here with them, Nina said, already grabbing her medical bag. I need to see what's happening. I'm coming with you, I said. Eli, I'm coming with you. She looked like she wanted to argue, but another scream echoed through the fog, and she just nodded. We ran out into the street together, into the chaos that was just beginning, and I remember thinking that Harvey had been right. Something was awake, something was hungry, and we'd already started feeding it. The screaming was coming from the Hendersons' house, the pale yellow one at the corner of Main and Oak. Nina and I ran toward it through the fog, our feet pounding on the wet pavement. Other people were emerging from their homes now, pulling on coats over pajamas, looking confused and frightened. I saw old Mr. Kowalski standing on his porch in his bathrobe, and the Martinez family huddled together on their front steps. Sheriff Leland's patrol car came racing down Main Street, lights flashing but no siren. He skidded to a stop in front of the Henderson house and jumped out, his hand already on his gun. Everyone stay back, he shouted, but nobody listened. We all crowded onto the lawn, trying to see what was happening. The front door hung open. Through it I could see Kyle Henderson, a quiet guy who worked at the gas station, sitting on the floor of his living room. He was rocking back and forth, his hands covered in blood. His mother stood behind him, screaming and screaming. Sheriff Leland went inside first, Nina right behind him. I followed even though my legs felt like they might give out. The smell hit me immediately. Copper and something worse, something that made my stomach turn. Kyle's father was lying on the floor beside the couch. His throat had been cut. Blood pooled around him, soaking into the carpet. So much blood that I couldn't understand how one person could hold that much inside them. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. I didn't mean to, Kyle was saying over and over, his voice flat and distant. I was dreaming. I was asleep. I didn't mean to. Nina knelt beside the body, checking for a pulse even though we all knew it was pointless. She looked up at Sheriff Leland and shook her head. Kyle Henderson, Sheriff Leland said, his voice shaking slightly. I need you to put your hands behind your head. Kyle didn't resist. He just kept rocking, kept repeating those same words. I didn't mean to. I was dreaming. More people had gathered in the doorway now. I heard gasps, someone crying. Kyle's mother had collapsed into a chair, her screams fading into this horrible broken sobbing. Sheriff Leland put handcuffs on Kyle, then looked at Nina. I need to get him to the station. Can you? I'll take care of things here, Nina said quietly. She looked pale and her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice stayed steady. Sheriff Leland started to lead Kyle outside, and that's when I saw Kyle's eyes. They looked empty, like someone had scooped out everything that made him a person and left just a shell behind. His skin had this grayish tint to it that didn't look natural. As they passed me, Kyle turned his head and looked right at me. "It told me to," he whispered. "It said he wasn't real. It said nothing was real. It felt so good to believe it." Then they were gone, out into the fog, and I was left standing there trying not to look at the body on the floor. Nina was talking to Mrs. Henderson, trying to calm her down, but the woman was beyond comfort. She just kept saying her husband's name over and over. Other people started filtering into the house. Doc Morrison appeared with his medical bag, even though there was nothing medical to be done. Someone threw a blanket over Mr. Henderson's body. I stepped outside because I couldn't breathe in there anymore. The fog seemed to press against my face, cold and damp. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone even though I knew it wouldn't work and tried to call someone, anyone, but there was still no signal. Eli. Nina had come outside. She had blood on her hands and she was wiping them with a towel that someone had given her. "Are you okay?" "No," I said honestly. "Are you?" "No." She looked back at the house, then at me. "This is what those others were talking about. The dreams. Margaret said she almost killed her husband. Tom said he almost killed his son. Kyle actually did it. But why? What's causing it? I don't know. Maybe something in the water. Maybe some kind of gas leak. Mass hysteria. I don't know." But I could tell from her voice that she didn't really believe any of those explanations. I thought about Harvey again. The hollow's awake. It's going to feed. "We need to warn people," I said. "Tell them to stay awake. If they fall asleep..." "How?" Nina interrupted. "We have no phones, no internet, no way to reach anyone outside of town. We'd have to go door to door." "Then that's what we do." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing it. "Okay," she said finally, "but we need to organize this properly. Get Sheriff Leland to help. Make sure everyone knows." We started walking toward the sheriff's station, which was just 2 blocks away. Other people were out on the streets now, talking in worried clusters. News was spreading the old-fashioned way, person to person. I heard fragments of conversations as we passed. Heard he killed his own father. "Emergency alert. What did it mean? Can't get through to anyone outside town." The sheriff's station was a small brick building that also served as the town's only jail, which consisted of 2 cells that were almost never used. Sheriff Leland was inside, pacing back and forth, running his hands through his gray hair. Kyle Henderson sat in one of the cells, still rocking, still muttering to himself. "Sheriff," Nina said as we walked in, "we need to talk." He looked up at us, and I'd never seen him look so old or so tired. "This doesn't make any sense," he said. "I've known Kyle his whole life. He's not violent. He's not capable of something like this." "It's not just him," I said. And I told him about the others who'd come to the clinic, about the dreams they'd had, about how they all said the same things. Sheriff Leland listened, his face growing grimmer with each word. When I finished, he sat down heavily in his chair. "So you're telling me that people are having dreams that make them violent? And when they wake up, they actually do the things they dreamed about?" "That's what it looks like," Nina said. "That's impossible." "So is that emergency alert cutting off all our communications?" I pointed out. "So is everyone in town receiving it at the exact same time?" But it happened. Sheriff Leland was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and grabbed his hat. "All right. We tell everyone to stay awake tonight. No sleeping. We'll figure out what's causing this in the morning when we can think clearly." He looked at me. "Eli, I need you to go to the church. Father McKinnon can ring the bell, get people's attention. Tell everyone to come to the town hall meeting room. We'll explain the situation there." "The bell," I said. "Sheriff, that bell hasn't worked in 6 years." "It rang tonight," he said. "I heard it myself. So it works. Now go." Nina touched my arm. I'll come with you." We left the station and headed toward the church. The fog was so thick now that the streetlights barely made yellow halos in the darkness. My heart was pounding, and I kept thinking about Kyle Henderson's empty eyes, about the blood, about Harvey's warning that I hadn't understood. We were halfway to the church when we heard the screaming start again. Multiple voices this time, coming from different directions. North, east, south, all around us. Nina and I looked at each other, and I saw my own fear reflected in her face. "It's happening again," she whispered. "People are falling asleep." And when they do, another scream cut through the night, closer this time, then another. We ran toward the nearest scream without even discussing it. That's the kind of person Nina was, always running toward danger when everyone else ran away from it. And I followed her because I was an idiot who never thought things through before acting. The screaming came from a house on Elm Street, the Chen's place. I recognized Sarah Chen's mother standing in the front yard, blood running down her arm, yelling for help. Sarah herself was on the porch, holding a kitchen knife, her face completely blank. "Sarah," Nina called out, approaching slowly with her hands up. "Sarah, can you hear me?" Sarah's head turned toward us in this mechanical way, like she was a doll being moved by invisible strings. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring through Nina rather than at her. "This isn't real," she said in this dreamy, disconnected voice. "None of this is real. It told me so." "What told you?" Nina asked, taking another careful step forward. "The voice. The one in the dark. It says I'm still sleeping. It says I can do whatever I want because dreams don't matter." Sarah raised the knife, looking at it like she'd never seen one before. "It feels good to believe it." Sarah's mother was crying, clutching her bleeding arm. "Please," she begged. "Please, someone help her. She's not herself. This isn't my daughter." I looked at Sarah's face and saw the same thing I'd seen in Kyle Henderson. That grayish tint to her skin, the empty quality in her eyes, like something had hollowed her out from the inside. Nina moved closer. "Sarah, listen to me. You're awake. This is real. Your mother is hurt and she needs your help." For just a second, something flickered in Sarah's expression. Confusion, fear. Her hand holding the knife wavered. "Mom?" she said, and her voice sounded almost normal. "That's right," Nina said gently. "Your mom needs you. Can you put down the knife?" Sarah looked at the knife, then at her mother, then back at the knife. Her face twisted in confusion. "I'm dreaming," she said, but now she sounded uncertain. "I have to be dreaming. I wouldn't hurt." "You didn't," Nina said quickly. "Not badly. She's going to be fine. But I need you to put the knife down so I can help her." Sarah's hand opened and the knife clattered onto the porch. She stared at her empty palm, then at the blood on her mother's arm, and her face crumpled. "What did I do?" she whispered. "Oh God, what did I do?" She collapsed onto the porch, sobbing, and suddenly she looked like herself again. Whatever had been controlling her had let go. Nina rushed forward to check on both of them while I stood there feeling completely useless. Other people were appearing on the street now, drawn by the commotion. I recognized faces, neighbors I'd known my whole life, but they all looked frightened and confused. Mr. Yamada from the hardware store, the Peterson twins who'd just graduated high school, Julie Foster who ran the diner. "What's happening?" Julie asked, her voice high and panicked. "I heard screaming and I tried to call 911, but my phone—" "Nobody's phones are working," I said. "Listen, Sheriff Leland wants everyone to meet at the town hall. Don't go to sleep. Whatever you do, don't fall asleep." "Why? What's going on?" I didn't have a good answer for that. How was I supposed to explain something I didn't understand myself? "Just trust me. Stay awake and get to the town hall." More screaming echoed from somewhere else in town. Then a crash. Then what sounded like gunfire. 2 sharp cracks that made everyone flinch. "Go!" Nina shouted at me. "Get to the church. Get Father McKinnon to ring that bell. We need to get everyone together now before this gets worse." I ran. My legs burned and my lungs ached, but I kept running through the fog until I saw the white steeple rising above the pine trees. The church was dark except for a single light in Father McKinnon's office window. I burst through the front door, gasping for breath. "Father McKinnon!" He appeared from his office, a small, elderly man with white hair and kind eyes that were now wide with alarm. "Eli? What's wrong?" "We need the bell," I panted. "We need to ring it. Get everyone's attention. People are dying, Father. They're killing each other." His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I told him as quickly as I could. The emergency alert. Kyle Henderson. Sarah Chen. The dreams that weren't dreams. He listened, his expression growing more horrified with each word. "Dear God," he whispered when I finished. "But the bell, Eli, it doesn't work. The mechanism broke years ago. It rang tonight, at midnight, 3 times. I heard it myself. So did Nina. So did half the town." Father McKinnon shook his head slowly. "That's impossible. I've been trying to get the funds to fix it for years. There's no way it could have rung on its own." But even as he said it, I could see doubt in his eyes. "Please," I said, "just try." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Follow me." We climbed the narrow spiral staircase that led up into the bell tower. The steps were old and worn, and they creaked under our weight. The higher we got, the colder it became, until I could see my breath misting in the air. Father McKinnon pushed open the door at the top and we emerged into the bell chamber. The bell hung above us, massive and dark, covered in years of dust and bird droppings. The rope hung down beside it, frayed and rotted just like I remembered. Father McKinnon reached out and took hold of it carefully. "I don't think," he started to say. The rope came alive in his hands. That's the only way I can describe it. It didn't just move. It writhed like a snake, wrapping around Father McKinnon's wrists and jerking his arms upward. The bell swung violently and rang out so loud that I clapped my hands over my ears, once, twice, 3 times. The sound rolled across the town, echoing off the mountains, cutting through the fog like a knife. And in that sound, I heard something underneath it. Something wrong. A whisper that seemed to come from the bell itself, words I couldn't quite make out, but that made my skin crawl. Father McKinnon stumbled backward, ripping his hands free from the rope. He was breathing hard, staring at his wrists where red marks were already forming. "Did you hear that?" he gasped. "Hear what?" "The voice. In the bell. It said—" He stopped, shaking his head. "No, that's impossible. I must be imagining things." "What did it say?" He looked at me with frightened eyes. "It said, 'Thank you for calling us.' It said, 'We're so hungry.'" A chill ran down my spine. Harvey's words came back to me. The hollow talks back now, and when it does, people listen. We stumbled back down the stairs and out of the church. People were already making their way toward the town hall, drawn by the bell. But I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Some of them were walking strangely, their movements jerky and puppet-like, and their eyes had that same empty quality I'd seen in Kyle and Sarah. "Nina," I said, scanning the crowd. "Where's Nina?" I couldn't see her anywhere. Panic clawed at my chest. I pulled out my phone uselessly, knowing she wouldn't get any message I tried to send. The screen flickered, and for just a second I saw words forming. "Do not commit acts of violence." But now there were more words underneath, faint and wavering. Or, "Do. It doesn't matter. Nothing is real." The message vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving just my lock screen. I stared at it, my hands shaking. Something was changing the alert. Something was changing the rules. A scream came from inside the town hall, then another, Then the sound of crashing furniture and people shouting in panic. Father McKinnon grabbed my arm. "We have to help them." But I stood frozen, watching people file into that building with dead eyes and jerky movements, and I knew with absolute certainty that we'd made a terrible mistake. We'd gathered everyone together. We'd rung the bell. We'd done exactly what it wanted us to do. And now, it was going to feed. I ran toward the town hall with Father McKinnon right behind me. The building was chaos. Through the windows I could see people fighting, grappling with each other, some trying to hold others back while some attacked with whatever they could grab. Chairs, books, their own bare hands. Sheriff Leland was trying to restore order, shouting commands that nobody listened to. I pushed through the door and immediately had to duck as a chair flew past my head and smashed against the wall. "Everyone stop!" I yelled, but my voice was lost in the noise. Mrs. Patterson, the sweet old woman whose water heater I'd fixed just hours ago, had her hands wrapped around Julie Foster's throat. Julie's face was turning purple as she clawed at Mrs. Patterson's arms. I grabbed the old woman's shoulders and tried to pull her off, but she was impossibly strong, her fingers locked like iron. "Mrs. Patterson, please, let go." Her head turned toward me and I saw those empty eyes, that gray skin. "It's just a dream," she said calmly, while Julie choked beneath her hands. "Nothing matters in dreams." Father McKinnon hit her across the back with a hymn book, hard enough to break her grip. Julie collapsed, gasping and coughing, red marks blooming on her throat. Mrs. Patterson turned on Father McKinnon instead, her hands reaching for his face like claws. A gunshot cracked through the air and everyone froze. Sheriff Leland stood on a table, his service weapon pointed at the ceiling. "Everyone sit down and shut up!" he roared. "Now!" The violence paused. People stopped mid-swing, mid-grab, looking around in confusion like they were waking up from a trance. Mrs. Patterson blinked and looked at her hands, at Julie coughing on the floor, and started crying. Others were doing the same, looking horrified at what they'd almost done or had been trying to do. "What's happening to us?" someone sobbed. "We're all going crazy," another voice said. "It's that alert. It did something to us." Sheriff Leland climbed down from the table, keeping his gun visible. "Listen to me, all of you. Something is very wrong in this town tonight. People are having violent episodes, and we don't know why. The only pattern is that it seems to happen when people fall asleep or lose focus. So I need everyone to stay awake. Stay alert. Watch each other." "For how long?" Mr. Yamada asked. "We can't stay awake forever. Just until morning. Once the sun comes up, we'll figure out our next move. We'll send someone out for help if we have to." "We can't get out," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. "There's a rock slide blocking the main road, and the forest route, the GPS just loops back on itself. We're trapped here." Murmurs of fear rippled through the crowd. I saw the panic building in their faces, saw some of them glancing at the doors like they wanted to run, but had nowhere to go. "Then we wait it out together," Sheriff Leland said firmly. "Right here, nobody leaves, nobody sleeps. We watch each other and we get through this night." I pushed through the crowd, looking for Nina. My heart was hammering in my chest. Where was she? She'd been right behind me when we split up. She'd told me to go to the church while she helped Sarah Chen. But that had been at least 30 minutes ago. "Has anyone seen Nina Clark?" I called out. People shook their heads. Father McKinnon put a hand on my shoulder. "She's probably still out there helping people. You know Nina. She wouldn't come here while someone needed medical attention." He was right, but that didn't make me feel better. The streets outside were dark and full of fog and people who might attack at any moment. I had to find her. "I'm going back out," I said. "Eli, no, it's too dangerous." "I don't care. She's out there alone." Sheriff Leland intercepted me before I reached the door. "Son, I can't let you go out there by yourself." "Then come with me." "But I'm going either way." He studied my face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But we do this smart. We stick together and we're back here in 20 minutes whether we find her or not." Deal? Deal. We left Father McKinnon in charge of watching the crowd and stepped out into the fog-choked night. The temperature had dropped even further. I could hear sirens in the distance, probably from Sheriff Leland's deputy responding to other incidents around town. The screaming had died down, but that almost made it worse. The silence felt heavy and wrong. "Nina!" I called out. "Nina! Where are you?" No answer. We moved down Main Street, checking each building. The clinic was empty, the door hanging open. Blood on the floor, but no bodies. That was something, at least. "Check the houses," Sheriff Leland said. "Start with the ones closest to here." We went door to door. Most people had already made their way to the town hall after hearing the bell. The houses were empty and dark, but at the Harris's place, we found the door kicked in. Sheriff Leland drew his gun and went in first, me following close behind. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Furniture overturned, pictures smashed on the floor, bloodstains on the walls, and in the middle of it all, David Harris sat in a corner, rocking back and forth just like Kyle Henderson had done. "David?" Sheriff Leland said carefully. "Where's your wife?" David looked up at us. His face was covered in scratches and his shirt was torn. "She's gone," he said in a hollow voice. "She attacked me. Kept saying I wasn't real, that nothing was real. I locked myself in the bathroom, but she broke down the door and then she just left, walked out into the fog." He started laughing, a horrible broken sound. I should have stopped her, but I was too scared. What kind of husband does that make me? "Which way did she go?" I asked. He pointed toward the back of the house, into the woods. She was heading toward the old mine entrance. The mines. Harvey's Hollow. My blood went cold. Sheriff Leland and I looked at each other. "We should get back to the town hall," he said. "Regroup, form a search party." But I was already moving toward the back door. Nina might have followed her. She would have tried to help. "Eli, wait." I didn't wait. I ran out the back door and into the trees, pulling out my phone to use as a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and fog, illuminating the twisted shapes of pine trees and underbrush. Behind me, I heard Sheriff Leland cursing and following. The path to the old mines was overgrown but still visible, worn into the earth by decades of use before the company shut everything down. My grandfather used to tell me stories about working down there, how the tunnels went deep into the mountain, how sometimes men would hear things in the darkness that made no sense. Harvey's voice echoed in my memory. We spilled too much blood in those mines. We fed it without knowing. The mine entrance came into view, a gaping black mouth in the side of the mountain. The old chain-link fence around it had been torn down, the warning signs knocked over. And standing at the entrance, staring into the darkness, were at least a dozen people. They stood perfectly still, their backs to us, facing the mine, not moving, not speaking, just standing there like statues. "Jesus Christ," Sheriff Leland whispered beside me. I recognized some of them. Mrs. Harris was there, the scratches on her face visible even in the dim light. Kyle Henderson's mother, Tom Bradley. Others I couldn't identify from behind. And at the far end of the line, wearing her paramedic jacket, was Nina. "Nina!" I shouted, running toward her. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me at all. I grabbed her shoulder and spun her around, and my heart nearly stopped. Her eyes were open but completely black, like someone had filled them with ink. Her skin had that same gray tint I'd seen on the others, but worse, like she was being drained of color from the inside out. When she spoke, her voice sounded hollow and distant, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "It's calling us home," she said, "down into the dark, down where it's been waiting. It's so hungry, Eli, and we promised to feed it." "No," I said, shaking her. "Nina, snap out of it. This isn't you." "Nothing is me," she said, and smiled with lips that were starting to crack and bleed. "Nothing is real. It told me so. It told all of us." Then, moving as one, All 12 of them turned and walked into the mine entrance, disappearing into the absolute darkness beyond. I lunged forward to follow them, but Sheriff Leland grabbed my arm, pulling me back with surprising strength. "You can't go in there," he said. "Eli, listen to me. You can't. She's in there. Nina's in there. And if you go in, whatever's controlling them will control you too. Look at me." He shook me hard enough to rattle my teeth. "We need to think. We need a plan." But I wasn't thinking. I couldn't think. All I could see was Nina's black eyes, her cracking lips, her hollow voice. I jerked free from his grip and ran into the mine entrance before he could stop me. The darkness swallowed me whole. My phone's flashlight cut a thin beam through the black, illuminating rough stone walls and rotted support beams. The air was cold and damp and smelled like earth and rust and something else. Something rotten that made my stomach heave. "Nina!" My voice echoed down the tunnel, bouncing off the walls, coming back to me distorted and wrong. I could hear footsteps ahead, multiple sets, walking in perfect unison deeper into the mountain. I followed the sound, stumbling over loose rocks and old mining equipment left to rust. Behind me, I heard Sheriff Leland entering the mine, calling my name, but I didn't stop. The tunnel sloped downward, taking me deeper. Water dripped from the ceiling, cold droplets that hit my face and neck. My phone's battery was dying, the light growing dimmer with each step. But I kept going because what else could I do? Nina was down here somewhere, and I had to find her. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. My failing phone light showed old mining equipment scattered around, pickaxes and shovels and carts with broken wheels. And in the center of the chamber, a hole. A perfectly circular shaft dropping straight down into darkness, so deep that when I shone my light into it, the beam just vanished. The 12 people stood around the edge of the hole, still as statues, staring down into it. Nina was among them, and when my light passed over her face, I saw that the black had spread from her eyes across her cheeks like ink bleeding through paper. "Nina, please," I begged, approaching her slowly. "You have to fight this. I know you're still in there somewhere." She turned her head toward me in that mechanical way. "Eli," she said, and for just a second her voice sounded almost normal. "You should have stayed away. It's too late for me. It's too late for all of us." "What is it? What's down there?" "The hollow," she whispered. "The thing we fed with blood and violence and pain. The thing that's been sleeping and waiting and growing stronger." The alert wasn't a warning, Eli. It was an invitation. It wanted us to try not to hurt each other. It wanted us to fail. Because every act of violence, every death, every drop of spilled blood makes it stronger. And now it's strong enough to call us home. The others around the hole began to move, stepping forward one by one, dropping into the darkness without a sound. I watched in horror as they disappeared, swallowed by the black. Mrs. Harris went first, then Tom Bradley, then Kyle Henderson's mother. "No!" I grabbed Nina's arm as she moved toward the edge. "You're not doing this. I won't let you." She looked at me with those terrible black eyes. "You can't stop it, Eli. You never could. That's always been your problem. You think you can fix everything if you just try hard enough. But some things are broken beyond repair." Her expression softened slightly, and for just a moment I saw my Nina again, the woman who'd saved my life more times than I could count. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you this time." She pulled free from my grip with impossible strength and stepped off the edge. I lunged for her, but my fingers caught only air, and she fell into the darkness without making a sound. "Nina!" I screamed, the word ripping from my throat. I dropped to my knees at the edge of the shaft, shining my dying phone light down into it, but there was nothing, just endless black. Sheriff Leland reached the chamber, breathing hard. He took in the scene, the empty space where 12 people had been, and his face went pale. "Oh God, did they?" "They jumped," I said numbly. "They all jumped." A sound came from the shaft. Not a voice exactly, but something that might have been words once, distorted and stretched and wrong. It sounded like wind through a tunnel, like grinding stone, like 1,000 whispers layered over each other. And underneath it all, I heard Nina's voice, Harvey's voice, my father's voice, all mixed together.
"Thank you,"
the voices said.
"Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for calling us awake. The alert was just the beginning. Now we're strong enough to spread, to reach beyond this little town, to feed and feed and feed until there's nothing left."
My phone died completely, plunging us into absolute darkness. But in that darkness, I saw lights. Faint, bioluminescent glows rising from the shaft like fireflies. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. They drifted upward and past us, floating toward the mine entrance, toward the town beyond. Sheriff Leland grabbed my arm. "We need to leave. Now." We stumbled back through the tunnel, following the lights that now illuminated our path with their sickly green glow. Behind us, I could hear something else emerging from the shaft, something massive and ancient dragging itself up from the deep places. The sound of it made my bones ache. We burst out of the mine entrance into the fog and ran. The lights were spreading across town now, drifting through the streets like poisonous snow. Wherever they touched, I saw people stop moving, saw their eyes go black, saw them turn and begin walking toward the mine with that same puppet-like gait. By the time we reached the town hall, half the people inside had already been touched. Father McKinnon stood in the doorway, his eyes streaming black tears. "I'm sorry," he said as we approached. "I tried to stop them. I tried to keep them safe, but the lights came and they just changed." More people filed past him, out into the night, heading toward the mine, toward the hollow that was feeding, that would keep feeding until nothing remained. Sheriff Leland and I barricaded ourselves in his office. We watched through the window as our town emptied out, everyone walking in single file toward the mountain. The emergency alert kept playing on every device, but the message had changed completely now. "Thank you for complying. Thank you for feeding us. We are no longer hungry. We are ready to spread." That was 3 days ago. Or maybe 4. I've lost track. Sheriff Leland stopped moving yesterday. Just stood up and walked out with black eyes and that hollow smile. I haven't slept since that first night. Can't risk it, but I can feel myself slipping anyway. The lights are outside the window now, pressing against the glass, patient and hungry. I found Uncle Harvey's old radio and got it working. It's playing that same emergency alert on loop, over and over. Sometimes I think I hear Nina's voice underneath it, calling my name, telling me it's okay to stop fighting, that nothing is real, that I should just let go. My reflection in the window looks wrong. Gray skin, eyes that are starting to darken at the edges. Nina used to tell me I was lucky that someone was always there to keep me alive, to save me from my own stupid mistakes. She was right about the mistakes, wrong about the luck. I think I'll rest for just a minute, close my eyes for just a second. The lights are so pretty through the glass and I'm so very tired. The radio crackles. The alert begins again. I wonder what it will feel like when I finally let go. When I stop fighting and walk out into the fog with all the others. Down into the dark where the hollow is waiting, satisfied and strong, ready to spread beyond these mountains to the next town, and the next, and the next. Outside, the church bell begins to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. In the distance, I hear screaming, new voices, fresh voices. The hollow is calling to them now, in towns I've never been to, places far beyond Forks. We were told not to hurt anyone. We tried. We really did. But the hollow was always going to feed. And now it's going to feed everywhere. I put down this phone and I stand up. My reflection shows eyes gone completely black. The door opens without me touching it. The fog reaches in with tendrils of light. Nothing is real. I hear myself say, in a voice that isn't quite mine anymore. And I walk out into the dark, toward the mountain, toward the hollow that's been waiting beneath us all along.